Hi, I'm Simon Rose. Thanks for joining us in our third video in this series, Inside Theta Healing. What I'd like to talk to you about today is this concept of creator, the creator of all that is, which is the God of Theta Healing. Before I get into it, I just want you to know that tonight's talk is not a reflection or a comment on any particular religion or faith. So if you're watching this, if you happen to be Christian or Jewish or Muslim or any other faith, I respect that. The comments that I'm making tonight about creator do not reflect on your personal belief systems, which I honor and value. What I do want to talk about this, though, is the concept of a personal God, what that means, and what happens when you take your own personal God and then try to use that to speak for other people. Personal God is a spiritual concept of an individual's personal relationship with God. It's the voice that they might hear in their head, which they believe is God. And throughout history, people have had this kind of relationship. We often call them prophets. And these people have often tried to help others and to speak for other people. The problem is, while some of them were connected on the most incredibly high level, I think you all know that throughout history there have been people who believed they spoke for God, and many of them did a lot of damage, and some of them actually fly airplanes into skyscrapers or cause other people to do that in the name of God. That's why we all need to be incredibly careful, and I have to say a little bit dubious, when someone claims to be talking for God. So if you're watching this, you probably have some involvement or background with Theta Healing. So you would know that the core kernel or essence of Theta Healing is that Vianna's been speaking to God since, I think she says, about the age of 4. She's been hearing this voice in her head that gives her instructions and guidance and told her how to heal herself and heal other people. The really funny thing, and this is just an aside, the really funny thing is that most of the information turned out to be wrong. So Theta Healing is constantly revised and updated. Forget what we said before, this is what it is now. Of course, now that I've come out and scientifically explained why belief work is dangerous, there's going to be another update of Theta Healing where everything Creator told me was wrong. Here's the new truth. It's natural, because as people evolve, their concept of God evolves. And you know what? That's a good thing. My concern, and this is what I want you to think about if you're a Theta Healing teacher or practitioner, my concern is that people give their power away to someone else's personal concept of God. It's incredibly disempowering. Now, if you have your own personal concept of God, that's great, and if you work with that, that's great as well. Okay? But to give your power over to someone else, or to fail to question someone else because of their own personal concept of God, that is spiritual suicide. Now, whenever I speak about this to someone who's really like a hardcore Theta Healing person, this veil, this mask goes over their eyes and their ears. They can't hear it. Why? Well, if you ask them why, they'll say, but Vianna gets it directly from Creator. It's this glossy look in their eyes. We call it the Kool-Aid look. Vianna gets it from Creator, so it must be true. Creator would never tell Vianna anything dangerous, and so on and so forth. That's what I mean about people giving that power away, and it really, really scares me. It's made it incredibly hard for us to speak the truth. In relation to anything else, it would be easy. But when it comes to this element of God, it makes it very, very hard to bring justice into this world, because the people doing injustice will say that they're doing it in the name of God. Okay, so in places in Africa, there are Muslim people that practice female genital mutilation. They circumcise their girls. It's very, very hard to say that that's wrong, even though it's morally repugnant to me. It's hard to tell them it's wrong because they honestly believe that God wants them to do it. And there are terrorists that blow people up and do terrible things in this world. It's very hard to have a moral conversation with them about it because they honestly believe that's what their God wants them to do. So when it comes to Theta Healing, and I've been trying, over the last year to sit down with high-profile Theta Healing teachers and say, look, here's some science. This is where you can help people better by taking the concept of Creator out of it. They simply can't hear it. They've given their power over, and they can't hear that anything that came from Creator could be wrong. That's what scares me. So what can we do about this? Well, I think that education is the most important thing. Education raises our awareness, and through education we can start to find our own truth. So I'm creating this series about Theta Healing as part of my contribution to that. It's not my intention to be anti-Theta Healing or anti-anything. It's my intention just to educate you, the reader or the listener, so that you can start to make up your own mind for yourself. If you believe in God or Creator, that's great. Find your own concept of it. Don't believe in someone else's. Now, I'm going to bring a little bit of science in, as I like to do in all of my videos, As with my first video, I'm really grateful here to Grant McFettridge and the Institute of Peak States. I'm going to use Grant's development of the triune brain model because that really helps me as a scientific framework to explain what I want to say to you. So if you've watched my first video, you might be familiar with the concept of the triune brain. That is that the way that our physical brain works, we have three parts. We have a human brain, a mammalian brain or limbic system, and an animalistic brain called the R complex. In fact, though, there are many different minds in our body. It's not just those three brains. We have a spiritual mind. We also have a sexual mind. We have other parts of our body or our being that actually speak for themselves. You know this. You maybe have never thought of it in these words before, but I think that everyone out there knows that there are times when your heart says this, your head says this, but your spiritual self says something else, or your sexual self says something else. That simply means that you have different parts of your being that have a different voice. When I say they have a different voice, they really do have different opinions sometimes, and they speak to you in a different tone. The more spiritually aware you are, the more you'll be aware of these different voices, and the more integrated they become. The ultimate goal of spirituality and enlightenment, at least according to the McFettridge school, the key goal is to unite all of these. To the extent that you have two or more different voices, you're fragmented, you're incoherent in your being. Now, why am I talking about this today? One of those voices is what's called the Buddha mind or the spiritual mind. What happens is in people who are incoherent as beings, they fragment their, well, I'm going to call their lower self from their spiritual self. They hear the voice of their spiritual self, which of course is telling them spiritual things, and they think that voice is God. Throughout history, we've had people who thought that they were prophets because they heard this clear voice telling them spiritual things and probably telling them it's God. Every one of us is God. Every one of us has the energy within us. It's called the spiritual mind. What distinguishes what I'm going to just loosely call a low-level prophet from a true master like one of the yogis is whether that God is a voice that talks to them or is it who they really are. So if you were to visit with a true master, you would actually see that they're what's called a God-realized master. There's no difference between their spiritual mind or Buddha mind and their lower minds, which means that they speak for and embody the essence of God. That's what being a master is. Now, unfortunately, in theta healing and probably most of the other healing techniques and cults and religions on the planet today, this information has been lost. And unfortunately, instead of trying to unite the minds, as we do in my work and as Grant does in his work, people are doing the opposite. They're actually fragmenting the minds. I spoke about this a little bit in the first video about belief work. What happens with belief work is you're directly working on the head and fragmenting other minds. It's even worse when we start to introduce this spiritual concept. Because those of you who've done theta healing know that there's this whole technique for going up, or in some cases expanding out, going through these planes of existence, going through what Vianna calls like a wormhole over the rainbow through the colors, etc. What happens when you do that is that you're creating a break, a disharmony between who you are as a being and your spiritual self. Anytime you feel that you need to go up or expand out to find God, or as Vianna puts it, to get out of your own paradigm, her exact words, what you're doing is you're creating a break. You're tearing that cord of oneness within you. You're saying, this is my paradigm, and that is God's paradigm, and they're not the same thing. So what theta healing is an entire cult based around separating the self from the godliness. What you can do instead of that is unite the two. You can actually do theta healing in the exact reverse, which is what I've been teaching, and bring that godliness into you and actually be and embody the God energy. You can be the expression of that like all the great masters in India are. So finally, to answer that question, what is the creator of theta healing? I have a very simple answer for you. The creator of theta healing is the Buddha mind or spiritual mind of Vianna Stibel. If it helps you, you could think of it as her crown chakra, but that's not exactly right. It's the spiritual self that sits around her. When Vianna was 4, she had an amazing mystical experience and connected to her Buddha mind. Then she realized that other people weren't connecting to it, so she developed meditation techniques that got other people to connect to the same place Vianna was going to. Now, some of them might be connecting to their own Buddha mind, but it seems to me that with this wormhole and the psychic sort of cord energy that Vianna has with her followers, I believe that she's actually connecting people to her Buddha mind, not to other people's Buddha minds, not to their own. So what is happening is people are getting more and more disconnected from their own oneness, from their coherence, by connecting to someone else's sense of spiritual identity. This is why you might have heard some rumors and stories about the creator of Theta Healing being a malevolent entity. Don't buy into that. That's just drama. But the reason why people would think that is they realize there was a direct cord between themselves and Vianna's spiritual self, which would probably look like a malevolent entity if that person was being sued by Vianna. I see where they're coming from. All you need to know is you don't need to do it. There's no harm done to you if you just stop it right now and internalize it. Just sit, allow all your beings to come into one coherent self and find the God energy within. There is no other place that you can find spirituality except inside of you. Look inside and be one.